So I realized I had not done a video like this before, probably because I didn't know what would be in a video like this. But I thought, since it's December 2022, so it's the end of the year, I would do kind of a year in review of what it's like to have my own law practice. And I don't get asked often, I don't think ever, by anybody like what it's like to have a law practice, but I imagine that's probably because I don't have a lot of young lawyer friends that don't have their own practices. So this might be helpful for somebody who's had their law practice for a long time, someone who's maybe in law school and will probably consider at some point having their own law practice, either right out of law school or at some point. So I thought I would do kind of just like a free talk video about what it's like to have my own law practice and here in Los Angeles and what that has looked like since I started it, and then like this year specifically. So I guess I'll just go into it. Kind of the main important thing one should ask themselves if they have an existing law practice of their own or they're contemplating starting their own law practice is like, why do you want your own law practice? And for me, I don't think I really asked myself that when I started it, which maybe in hindsight was good that I didn't ask that, but it probably wouldn't have hurt if I did. One of the reasons why I wanted my own law practice was because I just always wanted to have my own business. I always wanted to be my own boss. I came from a family where both my parents had their own businesses. They were both their own bosses. So I was like, oh, people should be their own boss. I had left a law firm I was working at to kind of go full-time into property management. So I was like, well, I might as well start my own law practice. And I ended up doing landlord-tenant law. So that's predominantly what I do now, is landlord-tenant law. But now that I've had my own law practice for a few years, I would say I talk a lot to attorneys who have had their own law practices and then went back to working for a law firm, but like at a partner level. And they liked it better because the main crux of the issue for many people who have their law practices is law practice management. So before I get into all of that, I kind of want to finish answering, why I want a law practice. And for a very top level reason, I wanted to be my own boss. Then on like little lower tier reasons, I wanted to create something. And when you work for somebody else, you're not really creating anything for yourself. You're not really creating, you're kind of contributing to this other thing. And I wasn't at a law firm that I was like, oh, I really want to like build this thing out and maybe be partner. It didn't seem like it was going that way. So I had, started my own practice. And I wanted to create jobs. And that sounds great. And I can't think of the word. But like it sounds like, oh, I'm like doing good for society and contributing to it, to it. But that has like a whole other, that's very challenging, which I'll also talk about in this video at some point. But those were kind of I want to be my own boss. I wanted to create something that I was like, oh, that's my thing. I made that. I remember when it was like not much, and now look at where it's at. And I wanted to create jobs. So in that sense, I think I've, someone achieved all those things. Now, there's pros and cons to having your own law practice, and I'll start with the pros probably, and then I'll go into the cons, because that's mostly what the year in review is about. It's not like awful, it's not bad. There's just things that I experienced, like growing pains, that I think no one really talks about. And especially if you're in law school, there's not like how to have your own law practice class. There's not like how to make partner track class. None of those things really get discussed in law school. So when I did it, there wasn't like, oh, I took this class, like, law firm business 101. That was not a thing. So I kind of didn't know. I just, I'd worked in a law firm and I had kind of seen it. and I understood the fundamentals. And I have a business law degree, so I did go to business school. Not that that is necessary. I don't think that really had much to do with having my own business, but I guess I had some sort of frame of reference from those things. I had some idea. But that being said, you're going to learn how to run a business by just simply doing it. And there's plenty of books. I read E-Myth, which I think is E-Myth Revisited, but it's the one specific for law firms. I've read that. I've read a few other books. I continue to read books. Now I'm reading a lot more about business specifically, considering I have one. But that will also kind of help you because there's a lot of things you just don't know. Like I know how to litigate a case. I don't, necessarily know how to do the inner workings of marketing. So that's something that definitely I'll probably talk about a little bit later on. But to start with the pros of having your own law practice, you have a lot of autonomy. Like no one is calling me asking where I'm at. I don't have to check in with anybody. If I need to go do something, I can just go do it. If something comes up, I don't have to plan weeks out to go maybe do some sort of trip. I can kind of do that. And a lot of that has really to do with the pandemic kickstarting a lot of things going online. Like for court, a lot of stuff is done remotely now. So while you do have to have court etiquette and conduct yourself properly and, look court ready on Zoom, you don't have to be in court as much. And in fact, a lot of judges kind of prefer it that way. A lot of clerks like it because they can get people in and out. Definitely less expensive for my clients because I don't have to go commuting to court. I don't have to pay for parking, so I can pass those cost savings on to my clients as well. So that's helped out a lot. And when I found with court going on Court Connect, Zoom online, you can work on something and then be in court and then go back and work. Commuting is a lot of dead time, especially in Los Angeles. But also, that being said, having my own business, I can delegate that to other attorneys that I hire that, they can go to court. Because a lot of it's I don't really need to be there. It's, a case management conference. It's it's not something that a high level partner would be going to. So in that case, it's really great that I can delegate a lot of things. We're working at a law firm. I might have to do it for years until I get to some sort of junior partner track where I go, okay, you can go do this or you can delegate it out. When you're an associate, you got to go do all of those things. So in that sense, it's not the end all be all, but you can go to 1,000 case management conferences and you will learn nothing past the first two. Oh, this is where you get a trial date. So having that kind of autonomy where I get to not only pick my schedule and deal with my own schedule, I can delegate things out that you don't get to really do, when you're working at a law firm. That being said, delegating is kind of not a double-edged sword, but there's a lot to delegating that this year I realized was something that as good as I thought I had put things together, definitely something that can always be worked on. But I'll talk about that in a bit. You can make more money. Not always does everybody who starts their own law practice immediately make more money than they would make working at a law firm. But you can make more money, and I, working for myself, made more money working for myself than I did working at a law firm. And I will say the trade-off was I made more money working less. So if I made the same amount of money, but I was working the same amount of hours, it wouldn't have been that much of a benefit to me. But I was able to bill myself more. so I could charge more. And being able to charge more, you don't have to work as much to make the same amount of money if you're, working as an associate. But I did make more money on my own. And my benchmark was, well, I'll have my own business and I have to make at least as much I was making working at a law firm. And I did achieve that and made more working on my own my first year out. So then I was like, okay, I don't think I've made a huge mistake in that. So yes, you can make more money. Another benefit to it is kind of like a subcategory of autonomy is I get to choose my area of law. So I came from an employer defense background and I did do some employment cases. But I was able to go into landlord-tenant, which was more what I was dealing with on the day-to-day and managing some real estate. So that was something that I was kind of in my wheelhouse, and it was fresh because I was dealing with it hands-on. So I was able to pick that area of law and expand on it, whereas, you're working for a law firm, they're doing the law that they're doing. They might have different divisions, but most people work for pretty small firms where we are a estate planning firm. We are a workers' comp firm. So they do very specific things that maybe you're not really all that into, or you're kind of bored with, or maybe you want to try something else out. Unless you're bringing in that business, it's not very likely you're going to be able to expand into other areas of law. And then if you're bringing in the business, at some point it might make sense for you to have your own practice where you're keeping all the business that you're bringing in. So that's something to also consider. When you have your own practice, those clients are yours. Now, if you leave a law practice, the clients can choose their counsel. So if they want to go with you, they can. But a lot of times clients will stay with the firm, not necessarily with you. It just kind of depends on the client. So I didn't really bring in business to the firm that I was working at, but I managed to get my own business going on my own. So that was, for me, I got lucky. It was not really an issue. And then something I touched on earlier, which is building something of my own. So my law practice is something that I built. It's mine. When you go to my website, it's me. When I do videos, it's me. My name is on the pleading, it's on the letterhead. And that's kind of something that you feel really proud of. Wow, this is my thing. And I think that that's great for people that want to do it. I've talked to many people in my life who are I never want to have my own business. I want to go to work, I want to do my job, and I want to go home. And that's great. We definitely need people like that. And there's nothing wrong with that either. That's not your jam, I totally get it. It's a lot of stress having your own business. But that is kind of one of the pros is this is your thing. And, my law practice has my name in it. So it is for sure my thing. So those are kind of the main pros that I see in dealing, or having your own business. Now, there is definitely a lot of cons to it, and it's cons if you can't stomach it or address it or deal with it and work towards overcoming it. It's definitely a major con. Con is kind of a negative connotated word in this sense. I would just say there's a lot of things for you to really consider before you go into having your own business that, are less glamorous than all of the pros I talked about. And one of the main ones is you have to have a lot of your own self-discipline. So I have had really good discipline. I, had no problems with college, no problems getting through law school. I had, some tough situations and circumstances that I went through college and law school with that really required self-discipline. So in that sense, I didn't have that problem. Now, I definitely see where I should get back in the group of things where you're a little more lax. And I feel I've lost some of my discipline, but it didn't just what do I kind of need it for? And so now looking back in 2022, I didn't have as much discipline as I think I had in 2021. And part of it had to do with, in 2021, I worked on, getting videos out there, providing content, and that generated surprisingly a lot of business. And from there, I kind of got overwhelmed with the amount of business that I took on. And so I had to get help, and I got through the work, and it was work that I could do, but it's definitely a lot for you to be doing all of this stuff. So that is where I feel like I wasn't disciplined in the sense like, oh, I just didn't get the work done. Like the work got done, that wasn't a problem. But I felt like I wasn't disciplined in scheduling around scaling the business. And I feel like most definitely this year I wasn't disciplined in that. And I go a lot, or I reference a lot, or in my mind I keep this quote from Seth Godin. I'm not going to get it perfectly, but I'll paraphrase it. And he talks about entrepreneur versus freelancer. And an entrepreneur, you know, they make money while they're sleeping, essentially. And a freelancer is trading their time for money. And when you're a business owner, the point of being a business owner is to not be a freelancer. And there's business owners that are freelancers in that sense, but it's hard to scale that. You will always be trading time for money. And that's where I struggle, where I'm a lot of times trading my time for money, and my time is worth a lot, most definitely, but then it takes away from me being able to go do other things like these YouTube videos that I really enjoy doing, or, you know, working on blogging and writing and just getting content out there that I really think was valuable, or will be valuable, or is valuable to a lot of people. So I'm not disciplined in the sense that I didn't make that a priority this year, and I really, really should have. And so that's kind of something that I'm really aggravated with myself about. But it was really hard I had this work and I had to keep up with the work. And then the people that I hired to help me, like, did not help, really. And I'll get into that in a little bit. So when you have your own business, you definitely have to be disciplined with your time, because no one's going to care about your business as much as you care about your business. And so if you want things to be better, if you want things to be scalable, if you want things to be systemized, it is totally on you to make the time to put that together. And that's where I felt this year. I was like, I think I got burned out, and I was talking to another attorney, and we've worked on a few cases together, and I told him I was burned out, and he thought that was like crazy. He's like, you're too young to be burned out. Like, you can't be burned out this like early in the game. I go, man, I'm like burned out. And it's because I didn't scale efficiently. Like, I didn't have enough help for the work that I was doing. And while the work was getting done, it was getting done because I was doing it. And that's not like what I want to have a business for. I don't necessarily want to have a law practice that I'm doing all of the work. That's not really helpful for me. It's not really creating jobs. And it's not the best and highest use of my time and my skills and expertise. So definitely discipline. And for 2023, I think my discipline really has to be in, you know, making sure I get my videos out consistently. And I focus a lot on writing content. And then I really focus on training. I think I have some ideas in the works of what I want to do for training that I've kind of done in some way, but could definitely flesh out and do better. I think that's going to be very helpful, just for like me. So when I go and hire people, you know, they'll have, it'll be way easier for them to go reference these materials than asking me 5 million questions that are like a lot of ways common sense, but they just don't know. So I get asked. So definitely discipline is like a high priority for me in 2023. Another thing is it's hard to find help. I cannot. I've had this conversation with everybody. I've talked to many lawyers, and I'm like, how do you have help? Like, we don't have help. Like, we don't. And that has been, and I think that's everyone's Achilles heel. Like, just anyone who owns a business is like finding good help. And there's so many people. Like, I went through a few paralegals this year. Not like a crazy amount, but it was just like they couldn't help, or they couldn't do it. And I really, like, one, I really stuck it out with this person. And I had a sense, excuse me, my nose is like running a little bit. It's getting cold.
I had stuck it out because I thought, okay, like she will work out. She will work. It's like this person will work out. And months, and it was just, there was no progress. And I'm still to this day finding stuff that wasn't done. And luckily, I had a manageable number of cases that I could go through and be like, oh, okay, this is fine, this is fine, this is fine. And there wasn't like huge like gaffes, but it was definitely, I had to like print out the case list, and I had to go through the docket for each case, calendar things that were supposed to be calendared that weren't. Luckily I didn't miss anything. And then I had to go through the Dropbox and reorganize all the files. And what was aggravating for me was that I had wrote like a 28-page manual on how to do everything. It's like 25 or 28 pages. And I got the idea from eMyth. I was like, oh, let me write out how to do everything. And then I had screenshots of stuff. I was like, I'm going to screenshot it so you could see what it looks like, what it's supposed to look like. And even with that, like things weren't getting done. And when you're a business owner, because like I've done all the work, so I know what it should look like. And I just had a feeling of things are not getting done. And that's like, when you're an attorney and you like hire a paralegal, you hire an assistant, like you're really entrusted with a lot. Like you're supposed to be there to help me. And if I have to keep telling you, like, check the calendar, make sure you book my court connect, make sure that the things, the deadlines are properly calendared and calculated. When I have to keep reminding you, it's like, then I could just, because the amount of time it takes for me to tell someone to do something, I could just do it. And that's why I had spent like 2 weeks writing this manual out that really I don't think was looked at. It might have been glanced over, but I don't think it was heavily considered. And then, I was just being asked questions that I were like, this is kind of common sense what the answer is to this. So in that sense, it's really hard to find help, and you're going to go through people. And that's something that I think I found like I had to like realize or accept later. But I was like, wow, this is, like it's not going to be like, okay, you're going to hire one person and they're like going to work. And then someone can leave at any time. Like they could just be like, hey, I'm not down for this. And they can just go. So that's where I realized, and this kind of, what I was talking about in discipline is like, oh, I need to maybe do like video trainings and like, do a screen record of like how to onboard a case, or, how to organize a Dropbox, how to calendar deadlines, et cetera, et cetera. And, how to email a client about an invoice, how to give up. I could go on and on about how to. I like this whole video could be that. But there's definitely, I was like, oh, these could just be videos. And then if you watch the video and then you really still can't get it, like, I don't know. And I go into depth about a lot of things. And I do like to give examples or samples. Like, here's a sample email. Here's a sample, notice of representation. It's like 2 sentences. So that's where I was like, okay, I probably, if I want to systemize it, that's one. Because then if like someone leaves, the next person could come in and they could spend 2 days just watching the videos and reading through a manual and like have a better understanding of how I operate, which I don't think anyone gets that in a law firm. You just like are expected to know. And if you've been a paralegal long enough, you would know. But it's definitely good to have like, hey, this is how I've done it. And, this is how the business works, is how it's structured. And then from there, I think they'll be better off, they'll hit the ground running, knowing how I want it done. So it's hard to find help, but it definitely helps you to weed through people much faster if you have some sort of system and training in place. And if they still can't get it after the training, then you should probably let them go. And the person that I had, I probably should have let go earlier, but I had this hope that it was going to work out, and I didn't want to let the person go. And ultimately came down to like, nah, like it's not going to work. Like it's not going to pencil out. And it also comes down to like the person. Like if you really want a job and you really want to do better at a job, you will make the effort. And if that's, you know, something that you're really genuinely interested in, you'll try. And that is, you know, that's not something that you can muster in a person. You can maybe encourage them, maybe spark something in them, but that really is the person. It's on them. So if they have the initiative, they'll show it. Otherwise, you know, you probably should let somebody go or have drastically lower expectations. And when you're an attorney and you're hiring someone to help you, you can't really sacrifice expectations. You just have to keep going until you find someone that's a good fit. Training, which I just talked about, that's part of like, it's hard to find help. It's hard to train because like you're busy doing a lot of other things. So that's right. The discipline factor comes in. You need to have the discipline to put together trainings. And it sounds like crazy, but I could totally see how that's helpful, especially like in a law practice. And you can train someone in a law practice. Like you can create trainings for that. And I don't think attorneys doubt that. I just think they don't have the time to do it. And that's something that if you're gonna have your own law practice, you should definitely look into that. It's like creating trainings for people. It'll just save you a lot of grief. I talked about this earlier about the Seth Godin, you know, freelancing versus entrepreneur. When you have your own business, you are like definitely freelancing until you're able to hire. And then even when you hire, you're still like, you're like overcorrecting because you want things, especially in law, like you want things a certain way. You want argument structured a certain way. You want to emphasize it. Like you have an intuition how you want to litigate. And that's not always something that someone else is going to get and they're not going to replicate. But someone might be able to still achieve what you want done. You know, like, and this is mostly in the form of doing like discovery, either propounding questions where you're asking the other side questions or responding to questions they've asked you. Every attorney kind of has their own way of how they want that done. They have their own objections and the way they want to put objections and the way they want to structure that. And then in motion writing, there's attorneys who like will write like a 20-page manuscript as a, you know, motion. And there's attorneys that are like, I want to cut through all of it. I want it, you know, X number of pages. I tend to try to get to the point in my writing. A judge, usually it's law clerks for judges or judge clerks that go through your motions. So you want it like as basic as possible, but that's like a feel you have for your practice. So that being said, you definitely, it's hard to kind of let that go and go, okay. And I try to give free rein to, you know, the attorneys that I hire, like you do it and then I will look at it, but you're still like having to do a lot of trading your time for money. And then there's so much in attorneys, like don't talk about this enough, or maybe they do, but you're like there's so much of your time in a business that is not billable. Like I do so much stuff that I cannot charge for. Like doing the bookkeeping, I cannot charge for that. There's a lot of email stuff that I go through that like I can charge for, but I discount a lot because it's just like I don't like charging clients for like a lot of emails, but that's, you know, you still got to do it. There's a lot of just like back end work that you just like, you're like doing to push things along that you just don't get billed for, or you don't bill for that. So while you may be worth X dollar an hour, there's many hours you are not billing. So in theory, when you start calculating out like, oh, I'm worth X dollar and I'm gonna like make this and I'm gonna work 40 hours a week. So it's gonna, no, you can have goals. Like I have like, you know, pretty low goals of how much I want to bill a week, but you're not necessarily gonna reach that. And not like your 40-hour work a week, not all of it's going to be billed at your hourly rate. There's just a lot of back end stuff that you have to do that like, you know, just is not billable. And like dealing with your staff, not billable, and you'll be dealing with them a lot. And lastly is when you have your own business, and you start out, you're like wearing a lot of hats. Like you're your own receptionist. You are your own like bookkeeper. You are your own conflicts checker. You are your own vetter. So you have to like vet leads yourself. There's not a lot, you don't have a lot of input from other people. So you're not only just doing the legal work, you're like doing the marketing, you're onboarding the cases, you're vetting the cases, you're like, you know, checking. There's times where, you know, maybe something comes up and you got to like, you know, go check with the bar, like, hey, what's your take on this? This came up. So all of that gets funneled through you. So when I'm talking about like things that you don't bill for, like being your own receptionist, you're not billing for that. And you have to answer a lot of calls. And I hired a receptionist simply because of the amount of calls that I get. It would like interrupt my day. Like I would have to stop, okay, the phone's ringing, answer it. Then I just couldn't get to things fast enough. So everything would like go unanswered in a voicemail. Then I'd have to like check my voicemail. So the receptionist helped me with that because it was like I didn't have to be interrupted by the phone ringing all the time. And they could take messages for me. So that was really helpful. But when you start out having your own practice, you're most likely going to be wearing all of the hats. Now, the fact that you're wearing all the hats, you will probably be better able to, you know, figure out how you want, like how I want my phone answered, how I want potential clients to be vetted. A lot of that you can then train and pass on to people. And that's something that I tried doing, and I worked a little bit with a paralegal, which like how to vet cases. I've talked to many potential clients, so I kind of know what I'm looking for in a case and what makes a case strong versus what makes a case weak. I have a feel for people's temperament, who I think is going to be a good client, who I think is going to be a very challenging client. And from there, I can kind of, you know, I can figure out if I want to take your case or I don't want to take your case. And that's a feel thing that you wouldn't have, obviously, if you hadn't done it so many times. So starting out, yeah, you're going to wear a lot of the hats, but then you'll be in better position to train people. Here's kind of what I want. If you don't do that, I think you miss out on a learning opportunity for yourself. Now there's going to be like everyone on the internet is all about like, you can't do everything, like blah, blah, blah. You should hire help and like, you know, delegate everything out. But that one is really unrealistic, and two, that robs you of, you know, your own valuable learning and setting up your business the way you want it to be. And unless you like worked at a law firm and you were like in, you know, upper management of a law firm, you wouldn't really know until you've actually done stuff. Like you've actually, you know, had to answer like a call from someone who like saw, you know, your ad online and wants to hire you for a potential case. So you will definitely be doing a lot of work besides just the legal work. And that's something that you kind of know, but what it feels like and how exhausting that is, you don't know any of that until you're actually doing it. So I kind of struggled with like, yeah, I could do all the work. And then you realized, wow, a lot of this work I want to delegate out because I don't want to do it because I've done it a million times before and I want to do more high level thinking. But then you have to, you know, have some sort of like training in place for them to do what you want. So there's a lot of like these factors that I find myself and a lot of attorneys I talk to, they're like, I am doing everything and I don't like doing everything and I don't know where to find help. And so I don't have the answer to where to find help. I've talked to many attorneys and I've asked them, how do you find help? And it's just, I guess, a matter of like, you just keep hiring people until someone works out. I have no idea, but it is definitely challenging to be doing everything, running a business on top of doing the actual legal work and having to think strategy on a case. So that's kind of what I realized this year, what my review for the year is. And this video is kind of long and, you know, maybe rambly, but I want a law practice that I can scale. I don't want to be a solo practitioner, which is basically a freelancer. I don't want that. That's not for me. And I definitely understand managing is very challenging. And I don't think anyone It's like, I mean, there's probably people that are like born managers. I don't think I'm one of them. It's something that I have to work at. And what I realized this year was, while I think, you know, people should have an initiative in their work and show that, I do genuinely see that a lot of people don't have that. And it's kind of easier to spoon feed someone up front how to do everything, even if it seems like silly, like how to do a notice of representation email. I went through 2 paralegals, both of which who didn't know how to do a notice of representation email, which is like just very simple. We've been retained by this person in this case. Please direct future correspondence to this office. I had 2 people who were like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, and I sent them a sample and they still like couldn't figure that out. So down to like very simple things like that, like everything is like ridiculously obvious to you as that is, it should be trained. And you're gonna go through people, and that's something that I had like a tough time accepting, and having talked to other business owners who've had businesses for a long time, and not just other attorneys, but just, you know, my clients who have businesses in general. They're like, yeah, you have to keep going, and then eventually you might get like that one golden employee who just like totally gets it. And that person's not, maybe you'll get them right away. That didn't happen for me. Maybe they're out there and they exist. But that is probably the single most, I think, aggravating thing about this year was my business growing, but me not having the help. And so I had to kind of, it was growing, and then I had to like artificially plateau my own business to kind of recalibrate myself, because I was really exhausted and overwhelmed, having to step in and correct a bunch of things that weren't getting done, and having to then re-go, and all the things that I delegated, have to step back in and redo it all by myself. And that's where it might hurt your pocket a little bit to take the time out, but it's definitely a worthwhile investment to create your system. And you hear that a lot from people, and you kind of never know what that looks like. But the first step would be to write out everything that is like involved in your practice, from vetting, from onboarding a case, from initiating a case, from, you know, going through the case to closing out a case, all of those things. Write it out and how you want it done, and then make samples for main things. You know, you should probably have if you're an attorney, you would have your retainer agreement already drafted up. I use software. I use My Case. This video is not sponsored by them, but that's the software that I use. And you can upload your retainer in there and send it for e-signature. So that's like helpful. I do, my invoicing through there. That's great. Like software definitely helps. I've always had software, and I think like that, even though I've had a hard time finding like human being help, definitely software is great. Software, like I love software. I love technology. So if I doubt anyone watching this doesn't have, not property management, law firm management software. But if you're watching this and you don't have that, you most definitely need it. But in there, I have a lot of template stuff, and creating templates helps systemize. So not only do you have kind of this outline, this general guideline of how to do everything, to having samples and templates in a place for people to find them. Like I use Dropbox, so there's a specific login for the paralegal, and they have access to the case files, and they have access to the templates. So that's, helpful for them to go look for it. And I think that's, something that I'm going to try to do more thoroughly in 2023 as like an experiment. Like maybe if I do kind of more training, and not training where like I have to handle it, like just like do videos, like do pre-made trainings, and see if that helps. So the next person that I hire, if they spend the, even the first week, like going through trainings and reviewing that, I want to see how much more that is helpful to them, and see if that helps with retention, and tracking if they're like actually doing the work and if they know how to do the work. And I think that will be helpful to better gauge that. Like if they have all these trainings and then you say like, hey, you're still not doing it, then you just know that person's not a good fit, and you could probably weed out much earlier and much faster. So this video is kind of getting long. I'm not sorry about it, but I hope if you're watching this and you're someone with your own law practice, we all feel it. Like everyone with their own law practice feels the same pain. It's like exhausting and tiring. And if you're someone who's thinking about getting their own law practice, or you're someone in law school and like that's eventually on your brain, these are things definitely to consider. And I'll put a link to some books that I read, like business oriented books, in the description that maybe you can read and get a sense or two out of that to help you with your business. It is almost 2023, so I wish everybody the best of luck in 2023, and thanks.